tree for the business research. And we will talk now about the some aspects in the research that help us in doing the researches and to make you have clear understanding of the meaning of the business research. We have to talk about the conceptual research and the empirical research and difference between them. Conceptual research is that research that is related to some abstracts, The meaning related to some abstracts, ideas, or theory. It is generally used by philosophers. That is for the conceptual and thinkers, but not us in our field of study, no. To develop new concepts or to interpret existing. But meanwhile, we go now to the empirical research. Relies on experience or observation alone. Most of our studies in the business are empirical, but not conceptual research. Conceptual, like for the philosophers, but empirical is our own studies. Empirical studies have a great potential for they lead to inductions and deductions. Yes, thus research enable one to develop theories and principles and to arrive to a generalization. As research based on the observation and the empirical evidences, it improves knowledge. So the purpose here and the final output is that it's improved knowledge and understanding as well as decision-making skills and abilities. Those are some points which we have to go and to know about research. Also, I talked before about what the meaning of dependent and independent variables. And we said the dependent variables are those who are being affected, but independent is the affecting, the one who's affecting. If we say as example, the relationship between the temperature and the ice cream, we say normally that when the temperature increase, the sales of the ice cream increase. That's right. For that reason, the temperature is the independent. Meanwhile, the ice cream is the dependent because it depends on the temperature. We talked about this before, but just I'm repeating it back just in case. When we plan for research and this process, the first thing is to identify, evaluate, and formulate the problem. You must track the problem exactly. Second, a literature survey. Literature survey tells me what had been told in the previous by the previous theorists or the researchers, the previous researchers, what they reached out to. This we call it literature study. Then we write a synopsis about very, very short cuts, like around 8 lines, about the research outcomes. Then I define the labeling variables. What are the variables which I have? It's very important. The independent variable and the dependent. Setting up the hypothesis, and I said before, the hypothesis are type of interpretation that I interpret or a cause-effect relationship. Or you can say the hypothesis is a cause-effect relationship. Reasons why I have headache. It might be constipation, it might be exhaustion, it might be blood pressure, it might be sugar level in the blood. Those might be all the reasons for the headache. For that reason, the headache is a dependent variable. Meanwhile, the blood pressure or the blood sugar is independent variable. Because the blood sugar, when it gets high, the headache will come. So here, the blood sugar is independent variable. Meanwhile, the headache is dependent variable. We also prepare the research design and determine the sample design and collect the data. And we know about the qualitative and quantitative approach for the data and execution of project while the process analysis and interpretation of data, and using statistical method for testing the hypothesis, then preparation of the report, which is including the recommendation how to solve the problem. How to solve the problem. The problem must be very well defined and must well identified. Scope of the problem. The research scholar has to fix up the four walls of the study. The researcher must identify which of the aspects he is trying to prove. Taking the example of the sickness, he should specify whether his study extends to all types of small-scale industries or limited only a few of them, and whether the study is limited to find causes for sickness or also to prescribe certain prescriptions. It's also justification of the problem. And we have feasibility of the problem, which is very important. Originality of the problem, also what's the reason of the problem. Defining and formulating research problems. Step for defining and formulating research problems are here. Stating the problem in general way. Each solve will be with its own relative what do we mean by the hypothesis? What I said before, hypothesis is a tentative statement. It's a reason, a cause and effect relationship. Hypothesis is trying to interpret what is the reason for the phenomena or what's the reason for the problem. It's trying to guess the reason of the problem. Is a tentative statement showing the relationship between two or more variables, the reliability and validity of which is to be tested and verified. It expresses the nature and the degree of relationship between variables. Hypotheses are assumptions, tentative statement, proposition, answering the question, proposed solution to a problem, statements which are to be tested. These are the components of the hypothesis. Hypothesis is one of two things: accept or reject. No other thing. To be verified empirically on the basis of a sample. So if we are using empirical research, we would use a sample. We'll use a sample. Why we use the hypothesis? Why we use the hypothesis? It gives the direction of the research, specify the source of data, means like I would depend on primary data or secondary data, determine the data needs, types of research which I will use. I will use empirical research or historical research, or whatever, appropriate technique of research. What the appropriate technique to do the research? Contribution to the development of the theory. What did I do as a contribution to the development of the theory? So the functions of the hypothesis, it's a guide for the direction of the study. It identifies facts that are relevant and those who are not relevant. It suggests which form of research design is likely to be more appropriate, and it provides a framework for organizing the conclusion, because I do the research actually to reach the step of the conclusion, and this is the most important step in all the research. But how I will get the observations, or how I'll try to interpret the cause-effect relationship? How can I interpret it? How can I interpret it? Through observation, Relationship between price and demand, as example, the sale and maybe and so on. Analogous casual observation. Poor people buy more lottery. Intuitions and impersonal exercises, like the story of Newton and falling of apple, the wisdom of Buddha under the banyan tree. Those are examples. We have here now different types of hypotheses. What are the types of hypotheses? We have descriptive hypothesis. Those describing the characteristics of the variables may be an object, person, organization, event, or situation. We have also a relational hypothesis, which is established relationship between two or more, two variables. It may be positive, negative, or nil relationship. A relational hypothesis. Actually, in our studies, we care about the relational hypothesis. Causal hypothesis, the change in one variable leads to change in the other variable. As example, dependent and independent variables. One variable is cause and the other one is effect. Like the relationship between the temperature and the sales of the ice cream. So when the temperature increases, the sales of ice cream will increase, and vice versa. When the temperature go down, the sales of ice cream will go also down. We have a statistical hypothesis. Associations or difference between two variables are hypothesized. Null hypothesis. It points out there is no differences between two populations. Alternative hypothesis, when we reject the null hypothesis and accept the other hypothesis. These will show up in the mathematical parts very clearly, and I will put 3 examples for this. Working hypothesis complex. Okay.